Imagine traveling back in time. Dusty stone streets, murmuring crowds, hearts on fire at the mere mention of a man who transforms lives. Among the names echoed through the centuries, one remains wrapped in mystery and reverence. James, called the Less. Barely mentioned from pulpits, almost forgotten in casual conversation, yet pivotal behind the scenes of faith, he walked side by side with Christ. A simple man, discreet, yet carrying an inner flame that quietly lit the surrounding darkness. Who was this apostle known as the Less? Why does his story, though brief in the scriptures, resist being forgotten? What lessons can his life offer each of us, especially as we reflect on a lifetime of faith? Today, we open this hidden book of memories. We'll relive his journey not just as a historical account, but as a mirror for our own spiritual path. And as we listen, allow your mind and heart to connect with the eternal questions. What does it mean to be faithful, even when unnoticed? What is truly great in humility? And what is eternal in simplicity? Prepare yourself, because this is not just the story of James the Less. It's also our story, a cinematic, poetic, and deeply moving journey. James was born in a bustling Jerusalem, steeped in tradition and hope, where every stone held stories centuries old. From a young age, he learned that life demanded attention to detail and patience with small gestures. Called the Less, not for his worth, but perhaps for his age or stature, he grew under his family's watchful eyes, silently absorbing the faith that would shape his life. The name did not diminish his strength. Rather, it concealed a courage that time would reveal. In local markets and dusty streets, James observed, learned, and prepared. Every encounter, every conversation, every touch of ordinary life was a lesson carving his character. Unlike other apostles, he did not seek the spotlight. His greatness lay in his steady presence, in his quiet care, in the inner strength of his convictions. Even before meeting Jesus, James already walked among people with a rare sensitivity, ready to recognize signs of something greater. And perhaps you, who have lived many decades, will recognize in these everyday details a reflection of your own journey, where quiet strength often speaks louder than fame. When James finally crossed paths with Jesus, something deep within him changed. The Master's gaze seemed to see every fiber of his soul, awakening a quiet courage ready to act. There was no fanfare, no grand applause. The call was subtle, yet irrevocable. James felt his ordinary life gaining purpose, as if every step had been preparation for this very moment. He joined a group of men who would change the world. Among Peter, John, and others, James was discreet but attentive, absorbing every word, every gesture, every miracle. Jesus' presence brought light to the shadows of daily life, revealing in seemingly simple details the vastness of divine love. James learned that following him was not merely walking beside him, but being transformed from within. Thus, the quiet faith he carried began to flow like an underground river, powerful and constant, ready to emerge at the right time. And who could have imagined that this almost invisible encounter would mark the beginning of a journey still echoing in countless lives, centuries later? James was not the most vocal, but he absorbed every lesson with almost reverent attention. Every word of Jesus was a seed cast on fertile soil, ready to bloom within his life. He saw miracles not as spectacles, but as messages of hope, teaching him to trust even when all seemed lost. Each act of healing was also a lesson in humility and compassion. On dusty roads and in quiet villages, James learned to observe the human heart. He sensed hidden pain, simple joys, and the constant need for love. He understood that following Jesus meant daily courage, small choices that seemed insignificant but shaped eternity. Each decision was a cornerstone in building faith. And though unnoticed by the crowds, James was a silent witness to profound transformations, sensing within that every moment was a bridge between the human and the divine. For those who have lived decades, as many of you have, There is something familiar in this continuous learning. Patience, observation, and the certainty that each small choice carries eternal echoes. While some disciples were remembered for bold gestures, James stood out in the meaningful quiet of his life. His greatness lay in simplicity, in living the gospel in the smallest details. He showed that faith is not measured by the loudness of words, but by the consistency of actions. True strength is often found in those who stand firm without fanfare. James became a mirror for anyone who felt small. His discreet presence comforted those who believed that only grand acts hold value before God. In the simplicity of a gesture, in care for his brothers, he demonstrated that true faith is practical. It lives in every moment of ordinary life. And perhaps you felt this in your own life, realizing that it was the small acts of kindness, often overlooked, that shaped your story and touched the lives around you. But would this simplicity be enough to sustain faith when the greatest trials were approaching? James walked among crowds that thronged to see Jesus. His eyes, calm and attentive, captured every detail as if knowing these memories were sacred. He witnessed the Master multiplying loaves and fish, turning tears into joy, restoring hope thought lost. These were not just miracles. They were signs of an invisible yet real kingdom. He was present when words of eternal life were spoken, when hearts were challenged, when the humble, simple faith was exalted over the powerful. Silently, James stored these memories in his heart like precious gems, understanding that to witness is more than seeing. It is to be transformed. With each step alongside Christ, his faith strengthened, like iron forged in fire, prepared to withstand future storms. And this living memory, filled with light and shadow, would become his secret weapon in the darkest days. But would he be ready to face the ultimate night? Even among friends and disciples, James faced silent doubts and fears. Courage did not show in grand gestures, but in the quiet decision to remain steadfast in truth. He learned that following Jesus meant confronting disapproving stares, harsh words, and even the temptation to abandon the path. Each challenge shaped his faith like a hammer on iron. James learned to fight without weapons, to endure without clamor, to remain faithful even when the crowd scattered and silence threatened to consume his heart. He was a man who understood that true courage is born within the soul, when no one is watching, when the applause fades, and only inner conviction remains. And perhaps you recognize this in your own life, the quiet battles, the difficult decisions, the silent perseverance that define who we truly are. But the trial James would face next would not be ordinary. It would test the limits of his faith in ways few could bear. James' heart deepened in understanding Christ's love, but he also knew the shadow of sacrifice. Every prayer carried both awe and fear, like one anticipating the weight of what was to come. He realized that following the light sometimes meant walking through darkness. Hope intertwined with pain, like a flame burning brighter in the darkest night. James understood that there is no glory without trial, no faith without challenge. Every obstacle was a silent lesson, etched into his soul and reflected in his deeds. In his life, small acts of service became monumental displays of courage, proving that sacrifice is shown in daily fidelity, not only in grand moments. You, who have traveled decades of experience, may hear an echo here. Moments where quiet choices bore weight far beyond their appearance. And as the night seemed darkest, James was about to write the final chapter of his life, where faith, courage, and sacrifice would converge completely. After Jesus' ascension, James became an anchor for the Jerusalem community. His leadership was not marked by loud words or dramatic gestures, but by wisdom emerging from the heart. He mediated conflicts, strengthened the weak, and reminded everyone that true faith is expressed in humility and constant service. Each decision reflected patience and discernment. James showed that being a leader is not about controlling, but supporting, not about being seen, but being trusted, not about shining, but illuminating others along the way. His life became an example of quiet perseverance, inspiring those seeking to follow Christ without needing to be the protagonist of history. Can you see, in your own journey, moments when silent leadership made a deeper impact than any bold action? And even with such influence, James still walked toward a destiny that would demand of his faith something few could endure. James faced persecutions that tested every fiber of his being. Social pressure, the fear of authorities, and constant threats did not shake his trust in God. He stood firm, knowing that every suffering held purpose, and that true faith is revealed when the world challenges us to remain steadfast. Even in the darkest trials, James inspired others with serenity and quiet courage, proving that strength lies not in fearlessness, but in acting despite fear. He realized that faith is not a shield against pain, but a light guiding us through it, showing that perseverance produces transformation. Perhaps you felt, over decades, the weight of silent trials that seemed greater than your strength. It is in James' story that we find resonance. And as the night appeared darkest, James was approaching the climax of his life, where faith, courage, and sacrifice would unite fully. James the Less left a legacy that spans centuries not in fame, but in faithfulness and quiet service. His life testifies that greatness is found in humility and steady devotion. He showed that true impact is not in immediate recognition, but in the transformation we bring to hearts around us. Every gesture, every word, every decision shaped the community enduringly. James teaches us that practical, persevering faith sustains the world, even when lights dim and history tries to overshadow quiet examples. His life speaks to all who, in their days, strive to live with integrity, even when the world values the fleeting and the grandiose. Small, faithful acts carry eternal weight. And perhaps, looking back on your own story, you recognize that acts of love, patience, and courage have left marks that no one can erase. Thus, the journey of James the Less lives on, not only in sacred texts, but in every heart, choosing courage, humility, and fidelity each day. James the Less reminds us that greatness is not in the spotlight, but in quiet faithfulness and consistent service. His life proves that even the smallest acts can resonate eternally. He teaches that every choice, every act of love or courage, no matter how unnoticed by the world, shapes destinies and inspires generations. True strength is in constancy, patience, and lived faith. Following his journey invites us to ask ourselves, where can we be like James, standing firm in silence, trusting the divine direction? For those of you who have lived decades, perhaps it's time to recognize that every act of care, every word of comfort, every step of faith has created an invisible yet eternal legacy. And so, James the Less story continues not just in sacred books, but in our lives when we choose courage, humility, and fidelity each day. If this video touched your heart, share in the comments how James the Less story resonates with your own life. Inspire others with your experiences and reflections, because the echo of faith multiplies when shared. And don't forget, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next stories of faith and inspiration. Explore our other videos and let each one guide you deeper into the beauty of Scripture and the strength of the human soul. God bless your life.